good evening, good morning, good day, and welcome to episode 2 of Estelle Says. Now, thank you for tuning in. I'm really pleased with how many people have been getting on board, having a listen, if it's on podcasts, as well as those who are tuning in via YouTube. Haven't quite worked out how to get this on Instagram yet. It's got to be under 15 minutes, so it was a little bit over last time. We'll see how far we go with this. Today's theme, I've decided to separate them as best I can. We're going to talk about mental health and we're going to talk about lockdowns because I feel like they kind of go hand in hand at the moment. You can't really talk about either without them affecting one another. And I mean, gosh, we've just in Victoria now gone into our 5th lockdown. Today they've decided to extend that lockdown. Always knew that was going to happen. This is the thing about the Andrews government, and you can say this is conspiracy, but it is not. He or they leak their information the day before things come out to the press. It's happened every single time, giving away the information of what they're thinking about doing, and they seem to do it to kind of get a feel for the public opinion. How they've gone ahead and done this, with the public opinion being where it is, I don't know. I've just got to say, I am so impressed with people over the last week. I guess the sad thing is this is coming from desperation, but I have seen so many people start to speak out about how this is affecting them and how they just will not tolerate this anymore. So already you're probably gathering there is no surprise that I am not pro-lockdown, not at the moment when we are in lockdown number 5. We've had more than, I think, 250, 300 days. At minimum, it's 200. I can't remember the stats right now. Locked up if you are Metro Melbourne and unable to, go about your business. So it's really starting to affect people. I haven't been in Metro through all of that. I've actually been really lucky in that my life, as far as I can still go out, I live on property, I can still do things, hasn't changed so much. And my income, I'm self-employed. My income has quartered because mine's all client-based, face-to-face. However, I'm in a pretty lucky position, but I'm here to talk about a few things that some people aren't aware of, and also things that are affecting them that they may not be aware of, and just things that I've learned for myself through research, anecdotal evidence, as I love, which means I'm talking to lots and lots of people and gathering information all around me, because that is one thing I'll say. I might not have 1 million followers, but I have enough that I have quite a reach that I can get an idea of what's going on in different parts of communities. And I'm going to touch on those. So, lockdown, the words in itself bring so much anxiety to so many people right now, and with good reason, because, we have gone from being, we are a lucky country still, but a very free-moving society, pretty chill, Aussies, how you going? You can just kind of, do your thing. We don't have to walk out our door and really be afraid. As a woman, of course, we have more things that we are afraid of, going out at night, walking home alone, getting in Ubers, all those things that some people don't even think about. And but as far as walking out our door, there wasn't really much previous to this that made us fearful, that we didn't have to think ahead about what we were going to do. We just kind of got to go about our business and do it. And that is such a luxury in itself, right? And there's no taking away from that. But that is a society that we have become accustomed to. That is the society that, has happened over a period of time in Australia's history. We're lucky. We're first world, pretty low crime rate. Really, it's a very safe country. Go into the nitty-gritties, yes, there's too much, domestic violence, rape, alcoholism, all these things. We can talk about all those issues, but that's not what I'm here today. Mostly, we are a lucky country. Oh, that beautiful sun coming in the window is going to blind us for a bit. It's that afternoon gold now. So, at the moment, there are people who are suffering, who have never suffered from any sort of mental illness before. And my heart goes out to you. So, without going too much into all of my personal history, I've got diagnosed PTSD, and it's getting much better from a series of life events. I actually had quite a troublesome childhood, which probably actually comes as a surprise because I look like everything is pretty good. My life's been pretty good on the outside. People would think that. People have often thought that I'm very wealthy, when actually I've come from absolutely nothing. I grew up in the South Melbourne flats. For those of you that don't know, that's Commission Towers. And from there, we actually moved to the poorest parts of Gippsland, and I spent most of my young life there until I actually bought a house to get my mum out of poverty, because I was raised by a single mum who couldn't work for a lot of her life, and she did do other things, but she's an incredible person. I lost her last year. Those who know that happened because of lockdowns, which I'm not going to go into too much about this in this episode because it'd just take up a whole episode. But essentially what I'm saying is that this is a new area of territory for so many people, and we shouldn't have to be here. And I guess I'm just going to talk a little bit about firstly just the real pillars of mental health. And this is actually, if you want to have a look, there's a neuroscientist, Erin Smith, who has talked about this at length. And depression in the world is one of the leading causes of disability. Like, not cancer, not obesity, not diabetes, all these things that we hear about, cardiac disease, all these sorts of things that are going on. Depression, it is one of the most debilitating things that is affecting our society. And with good reason, because anyone who's ever experienced depression, and for those of you that haven't, you're very lucky, and some people don't even know, that's the thing. But depression is a feeling, it can be completely all-encompassing, your whole body, where either you can't get out of bed because you have physical, like depression can affect you so much that it'll physically incapacitate you. Like you cannot physically get out of bed. You have no energy. That's when chronic fatigue comes from. But depression can just be on a lower level, you have no energy to do your day-to-day tasks. And when I was in the height of my PTSD, when it first came on, I was sleeping like 16-hour days. I wasn't able to leave my small apartment and go and do things. I couldn't wash my clothes. Like I couldn't feed myself. It's really small things, but when you're depressed, they are huge things. And they kind of accumulate. And this is the thing about the mental health, is that we have all these emotions that we often don't know how to deal with us, and some that don't serve us very well, something like guilt. And when you start not being able to care for yourself for what you feel is no good reason, you go into this trap. Anyway, I could go down that path. I'm not going to. All I'm saying is depression is really awful. It can be career ending. It can be life ending. It can be life changing. Even just postnatal depression, not just, like, it's a huge thing. It ends up changing your whole personality and the way that you can actually enjoy your life. And it's really hard because unfortunately some people, once they've been depressed, never get to come out of that. And it's so sad because people actually have chemical changes in their brains, and then it also goes into changes in their body, and it creates illness. And it's just awful. Like, depression is awful. But also there's anxiety. And anxiety, they say, I think it's like 40% of the world suffer anxiety. I'm surprised it's not higher, to be honest. And I always think, who are those people that have never been anxious? And the levels of anxiety obviously differ. Like, again, personal experience, when I was at the height of my PTSD, I was scared of everything. Like, I would walk down the street and I'd be jumping at sounds. I'm jumping at things I'm watching on TV. I'm jumping at shadows. I'm talking like hypervigilance to the point where life was really hard to live. And then I guess that's why I didn't leave the house a lot for a long time. But anxiety can be something as simple as you're afraid to do something socially, or you're afraid to put yourself out there in some way, or even just that your life is starting to be kind of semi-ruled by fear, which isn't actually a normal response. Not a normal response, sorry. It is a normal response given life circumstances, but it's not an optimal response to have, because if you're constantly living in fear, you're going to be doing actions that are things that are probably not best for you and best for the people around you. And that's why you generally see people who are quite anxious suffer other things like addiction and isolation and all sorts of things that the person underneath them isn't the person that you're getting. And it's just through a series of circumstances, whether it be food, social, trauma. There's so many life circumstances, grief, it can, myriad of things. I'm not going to go into that, but at the moment with lockdowns, it's people are getting pushed to their limits. People that would never have been experiencing these sorts of things. And some people still probably aren't really recognizing yet, because they don't have that self-awareness, because they haven't been through this, what's actually happening to them. And it's just coming out in strange behaviors. So that's something for those people that don't really know much about working themselves out yet. This will all be coming up, and they'll be starting to feel uncomfortable, which is not nice in itself. But just back to this study from Erin Smith, and neuroscientist, is with depression comes cognition impairment, which is a really big problem. But there's 5 pillars that for anyone who's done therapy, you'll have your psychologist talk to you about this, or anyone who's read pop psychology books, they talk about these pillars and what you need day to day to be okay. And the main one is connection. And I guess at the moment that's the biggest thing that is actually plaguing us, is the lack of connection, but it falls into so many other things. I remember reading a study that was about humans and how, because we descended from apes, we're animals, we're pack animals, and that if we don't actually interact with 5 different people each day, we cannot be okay. So I don't mean that we have to know them or have any particular agenda with them. It's just to see them, to interact with them, talk with them, be in the presence of. You have to interact with 5 different people a day to be okay, and certainly that is not happening at the moment. This is aside from all the other parts of connection that people find in day-to-day life, which could be from school, it could be from work, it could be from going down the street to get a coffee, going shopping, sporting things. There's so many different things, and the thing is that connection and community and that need for tribe, it actually links into just about every single thing that we normally do day to day in this modern society, and you take it for granted up until you have it taken away from you. And so the first main pillar is connection. The second one is that in order to be mentally well, and this is, if you even have the energy to do this, you need to be active. Now, people live very busy lives, and I also know that people are self-conscious. So to be active is very different for a lot of people, and shutting down gyms has been one of the worst things they could have done for mental health. There's never been a transmission that's happened in a gym, and yet they still, I've got Shooks tapping on the window, yet they still insisted on it, gyms being one of the last things to open through the last lot of lockdowns, which to me, I don't understand. I don't understand most of the decisions, but we'll go into that a bit more. But, number 1 is connect. Number 2 is be active. Number 3 is that we need to keep learning and be able to engage with new activities. So at the moment, that's completely impaired. Number 4 is to be able to be aware and know what's happening kind of around you, being able to be mindful, being able to sit still. The awareness one isn't so much the problem. But number 5 is to help others. And how much do you think we can actually help others? Because this is the thing, is a lot of people actually get a lot of their self-worth and purpose through helping others. Your job might be helping others, but also you might just do things day to day helping others you don't even realize. But we're in a position where we are kind of it's being frowned upon to help others. We're being told you've got to keep social distance, you can't, go into people's homes and do things that you would normally do. You can't go around and have dinner, you can't go around and fix your neighbour's fence, you can't go do these things that are just kind of so linked in our day-to-day that we don't realise again until it's taken away. Now, apart from those pillars, because they're kind of obvious, at the moment, one thing that, yes, we are privileged to be able to do this is having our routine. Now, when a human or when a person is able to have a set lot of routines, so it's whether you get up, you go to the gym, you go to work, you go home, you cook dinner, any variation of that, but it all, as you can see, involves events of doing things. It becomes a routine, and what happens with routine is it actually alleviates anxiety. It takes you out of the fight or flight mode. So what do you think is happening in society at the moment? Well, routine is basically impossible for someone employed or unemployed, whatever your situation, to go ahead with, because we have no certainty in what we can actually do day to day. And these are just things that are actually all adding up. It's accumulation that's adding up into people's mental health and causing them serious grief without even noticing. Like, I mean, this is a small scale, but even just, people like to go and get their daily coffee, and they like to be able to go and sit in their cafe and read the paper. Like I used to watch when I lived in Fitzroy. I used to watch a lot of elderly people every day, same time, go into their coffee shop, have their coffee and cake, sit there, read the paper, go about their day, and that goes on every single day. When you take people's routines away from them, some of them that have been embedded in them for 60 years, it starts to cause upsets in other parts of their mental health and in their life. And as I said, if people can no longer deactivate that fight or flight through routines, they're starting to just be more anxious all of the time. And it means that it's harder for them to find purpose. And it's really hard for them to then promote healthy habits. And this is where things like addiction come in, and things at the moment, I don't know if you've seen, but it's no joke when they're talking about Dan Murphy's and all these liquor license, bottle shops and stuff. They're essential, and people's drinking it's up, like, I'm making this stat up, but I remember reading it was like 30 or 40%. There is no surprise, because healthy habits, the things that people do to create those healthy habits, are being taken away at the moment. Pretty much like all the things that they would normally do. Like it was at the point with lockdowns where like police were out monitoring if you were out exercising for more than an hour. Some people need more than an hour outside, and some people need someone with them because they live alone, because they just think about this. If you live alone through some of these lockdowns, you're not really able to interact with anyone. You might be able to go to the coffee shop, grab a takeaway coffee. You got to wait outside. People are looking at you. You're all masked up. You can't actually like interact and see people's faces. You can't get a feel for anything other than fear of what's going on out there, And I had a friend who lived alone through the first lockdowns, and she was struggling because the only time she could see someone is if she went for a walk and did that exercise with someone. So she got maybe an hour of contact, but she was one of the lucky ones who was able-bodied, who could get out of the house, who could go and do those things, who had friends that were within that 5 kilometers. Just the list goes on. But it just really makes for things like addiction, depression, and mental illness, physical illness to just rise. Which brings me to my next point. Yes, the coroner's report does not show in Victoria that suicide numbers are up. Okay, and I had a friend message me about this, and it's cool because we always hash things out. But this is the thing. I worked in government for 13 years, and if you believe working with numbers anywhere in most workplaces when it comes to like KPIs and reporting of any description, if you believe that those numbers are telling the truth, then you haven't worked with numbers. The thing is, numbers can lie. Numbers get pushed sideways. Numbers get manipulated to show a particular outcome. And at the moment, it is in the government's best interest to not show that suicide rates are up. This is not a conspiracy. This is about election. This government wants to be re-elected. Dan's been in power since 2014. He's going to want to be re-elected and continue what he's started with everything that he's doing. He's not going to want to lose the election. If they can clearly show that suicide rates are up, that's a really hugely bad reflection on the government. So you need to think about that as one. And these are government stats. Now, I did hear that accidental death rates had gone through the roof. I haven't been able to find them. So again, I'm not going to be able to give you a source. However, through my anecdotal evidence and my personal investigation, which I like to trust to begin with and find fact on top of that, is that those services that are out there to help people, which are put out by the government, well, not really, but they're advertised in the general public through non-for-profits, etc., are not coping. So when I talk about that, we're talking about Lifeline, Kids Helpline, and those sorts of, I think Beyond Blue is another one. So again, my stats I have looked up, but I haven't got it in front of me. I know that Kids Helpline was up like 187%, and through looking at Voice of Victoria, if you don't follow her, you should go and have a look. She's really good. She gets thousands of people's stories sent into her just about weekly about what's going on. She's talking about kids self-harm, like the suicide rate in children, or at minimum the self-harm rate in quite young children, is really up, and that kids helpline number being up 168%, like, it's just awful. Lifeline, I know because I had a friend who worked at Lifeline, had to put on significantly more staff, volunteers mostly, and they're still unable to kind of cope with the demand. An example is they have a text service that if you couldn't get through on the phone, you could text, and usually you'd get a response quite quickly. I think it was within about 15 or 20 minutes. I actually used it myself at one stage to test it, and I waited 5 hours, and it's still, they were just saying, we're experiencing high volume. They haven't been able to cope with calls numbers either, even with a 30 to 40% staff increase. Like, who benefits from lying about that stuff? Like, it is happening. This is what's happening in society. So yes, I can't give you the suicide numbers, but I can tell you anecdotally, you look out in the community, they are suffering. I had a friend take his life through the first lockdown last year, and it was really, really awful and hard for me because he lived so close. Like, he lived within 15 Ks, but it was at the time when we couldn't be outside our 5 kilometers. And I was texting him like, hey, like, how are you? And all he could say to me is, I'm so lonely. And yeah, I can look back and wear all this guilt and say I should have done more, but I wasn't even able to. Like, we weren't even able to. The only way we could have caught up is I did message him and say, hey, do you want to go for a run? That was the only way I was able to justify through those lockdown measures us being able to hang out. And he actually ended up taking his life like a week or two later. And this was a beautiful, strong person who was actually he was an advocate and a lawyer for people who couldn't speak for themselves, and through people who suffered mental health and all sorts of things. And for him to take his life through that lockdown just destroyed me. And that's what started me going, what is happening here? Like, how is this happening? But yeah, I won't go into it anymore. It really affected me. So one of the things that people say that they're pro-lockdown is because of the impacts on the health system. I just want to address this a little bit. So one of the things I've seen rearing its head a lot is that people are pro-lockdown because they don't want to overload either friends or families or just generally the health system. Here's the kicker. The health system is breaching. The public health system, although it's been quite neglected for many years, is struggling. So if we even just talk about, for me, something close to my heart with my mum passing is that she missed out on elective surgery that in anyone's right mind was not elective. It was heart surgery because they bumped it saying it wasn't because of COVID. Again, first lockdowns, they were all crazy with restrictions, saying it wasn't necessary to go ahead with it at that time. So what happened was she was supposed to have her heart zipped up. She didn't. So 2 months went on. She didn't because it was elective and they didn't push for it. They busted all of this surgery and put it to the side and said, no, unless like you're bleeding and dying pretty much, we're not going to fix it right now. So she got kind of lost in the cracks, and 2 months later she stroked, and then within 5 days she died. She was gone. And it was totally preventable. Even the nurse, when I first saw her in hospital, said, I don't know what's going on, but her surgery should have gone ahead, but because of COVID, they just haven't been looking at these files, at these numbers. They've had their priorities are elsewhere. The worst part was that she was in a COVID ward, and how many people do you think were in that ward for COVID? None. Anyway. So back to the stress. So surgery numbers are breaching. There's a surgeon I follow on Twitter, and she talks about how her backlog, this was 6 months ago, how her backlog she cannot see catching up in the foreseeable future over the next 12 months. It is already through the roof. And again, it's not just my mum. There are so many people who need life-saving surgery that has been put on hold, which also means all the other surgery types are put on hold. So it's not just like knee reconstructions, hip reconstructions, which remember, some of those are for 80-year-old people that actually need those surgeries to live their lives. Yes, they might not be dying, but they still need these surgeries to live their lives. They don't have the money to go private. So there's just so many implications in surgery alone. The next thing is the burden on psychology. Okay, so luckily, I've been seeing a therapist ongoing for many years, so I'm not a new patient. If you're a new patient, I rang 3 different psychologists a month ago to find out what their wait times were, and all of them said they were booked out, either not taking new patients, and they would not be able to see anyone until the new year. So let's imagine you're already struggling with mental health. You try to seek that help, which is a huge thing because most people don't know how to reach out. You try and do that, and then you can't get in with a psychologist for what at the time was 6 to 8 months. That cannot have been proved because mental health has gotten worse. It has not improved. So there's another burden on that part of the health system. And then there's a direct burden on the emergency wards, which people, I don't know, I think they're delusional to think that it's not already happening. It's bottlenecking. So GPs are refusing to see people and are unable to do a lot of the things they would normally do. And it then pushes people to where? Emergency. Emergency is there generally to deal with what? Emergencies. Right now, the wait times are so blown out, not because of people who are COVID patients, but because of people who still have emergencies and things that need attending to that cannot. I read through Voice of Victoria, there was a girl who fell off her horse, typical, who had split her face open, and I think they said something about there might have been a spinal injury, but I can't remember. But she had to wait 14 hours to be seen in emergency. And what happened was the paramedics had to try to see to this person the whole time. So those paramedics are tied up when they should be out helping other people. Like, emergency wards are dealing with stuff that should be going through GPs. And I just cannot believe that people are not seeing this. And, you know, the other thing is that there's then the psych wards, and psych wards are also breaching. This is all public. Psych wards are breaching because they're having such an increased number of suicides. And I've talked to nurses who work in mental health wards, I'm not just making this up, that can't deal with the increased number of people, and they don't know how to reintegrate people into the community because they can't do it quick enough. So there's not enough beds. So if you're talking about the strain on the public health system or the health system in general, it's not a reason to be pro-lockdown, because lockdowns are actually causing more damage as far as all of those are concerned. Now, something else while we're talking about mental health, lockdowns, just quickly, are masks. Now, I'm not going to go into the effectiveness of them because it seems like even the WHO have been on and off the fence. Effective, not effective. If you change them every 20 minutes and they're surgical, then they'd be working. Let's not talk about that. Let's talk about the reason why some people don't wear masks. I don't wear a mask. I get asthma and I have PTSD. My PTSD on most days would probably enable me to wear a mask, but more than 10 minutes in a mask when I'm actually feeling good means that I can't breathe very well. So I look like I'm fine, but these are the things that are going on. So this one absolutely breaks my heart, is that I have a friend who I've met through social media, and she has had one of the most awful traumatic childhoods that I've heard of. She, without going into explicit detail, but just a trigger warning here for anyone, if you're sensitive, I'd say skip ahead 30 seconds to a minute, because I'm going to talk about, she suffered domestic violence and she also suffered drugging. So this is like stuff you couldn't read about it, couldn't write about it. Her stepfather used to forcibly drug her, and yeah, we can talk about how awful and problematic that is. But it means now that when she puts on a mask, she gets claustrophobic and it triggers her back into complete utter like PTSD, panic attacks, like self-harm, all sorts of things. But no one really considers that when they're just looking at her saying, why aren't you wearing a mask? Like, she actually even had a mental health ward that I'm so shocked, which I cannot believe, that were trying to put masks on her when she'd come in for self-harm. And now when she's self-harmed, she won't even call for paramedic help anymore because she's terrified of them putting a mask on her once she gets to hospital. She said the police were great, but yeah, actually when she got to hospital, they were trying to mask her, and this is still a mental health ward. So I don't know what's going on there because it just doesn't make sense. But what I'm saying is there is so much more going on behind the mask that you are not aware of. The Karens at the supermarkets, I've had so many actually full on abuse me why are you not wearing a mask? And I'm a strong person. Like, I'm very strong in my beliefs. I'm very strong in being able to assert myself. And I get it daily when I don't wear a mask. There are days that I sometimes at the start would wear a mask because I just couldn't deal. I was too fragile. I couldn't deal with any of it. But there are most people that don't have the resilience and the strength that I do to say anything or even to go out into public. They just simply don't go into public. There was a woman, I saw a doctor post, that had a lump underneath her breast for 3 months, but she was too terrified to go anywhere other than the doctor's surgery. She wouldn't even go and get a scan. She wouldn't even go and do the things that she needed to see if it was cancer. Turned out it was cancer. It is cancer, and she's in such a worse position of dealing with it now because she's left it so long. So I guess I'm just saying, this fear-based stuff, I understand that you have been conditioned to be terrified of this virus, and it's no one's fault. That's just where you are at, but don't take it out on other people when you're in public because you don't know what they are suffering from. And if people don't want to wear a mask, that is up to them. I'm not going into like the politics of what I believe and what I don't with the whole COVID thing. I'm just saying, be aware that there are reasons, serious reasons, that people do not wear masks, and they should not have to disclose why to you for even a second. And you should not be worrying. If you've got your mask on, why are you worrying about them? It's kind of like this vaccinated, unvaccinated discussion. Why are you worried about them? This middle ground that I want to open up, it's that people need to hear from each side what's going on, and people need to just be a little bit softer with one another, because it's at a point where I'm kind of like, how are we ever going to come back from this socially? But we have to. Oh God, I've been talking for 30 minutes already, so I'm going to wrap a couple more things up into this one and kind of finish up. So just something quickly is I've had, because I'm a bit of a, people laugh and say I'm a hippie, but no, I'm very, very good at living a kind of low tox life, and that's apparently now considered that I must be a conspiracy theorist if you have any sort of your own wellness. I'm about you taking your wellness into your own hands, learning about yourself and what works for you and what doesn't, and not relying just on powers outside of you. You know, that means looking after your diet, knowing what you're putting in your body, what you're putting around your body, who you're around, what you're doing. And I've had a lot of friends say to me, hey, I've got eczema, I've got all these things going on, what is it? And for me, it was straight away, I was like, how much hand sanitizer are you using? They're like, oh, I didn't even think of that. Just a little word of advice. You can do what you want, but please be aware that the long use of hand sanitizer is not going to be good for you. Your skin is your biggest organ. No, I'm not a doctor, but it doesn't take a genius. Your skin is your biggest organ, and if you are sticking alcohol all over it several times a day, all the time, even washing your hands that many times is not going to be good for you. And this is the thing, Dettol and all these companies have made so much money, millions and millions of dollars all these years, talking about killing 99% of germs when water kills pretty much 99% of germs. And I'm not saying it's going to stop COVID and whatever, but just think about, you've been using hand sanitizer for nearly 2 years now, and you need bacteria on your body for your body to function. We are made up of so much good bacteria, so much bacteria in general, and if you are killing it off constantly, you're going to be starting to upset your body. So all I'm saying is be a little bit more mindful with your hand sanitizer use. Don't have a go at someone when you see them walk into a shop and not use it, because again, you don't know if they're having allergic reactions right now and they can't even deal with it. So just a few things in the middle, you know, that I wanted to enlighten people of. Oh gosh, the biggest thing about lockdowns is that they suck, is that we can't just go and live our lives like we used to. And it seems like that whole idea of normal seems to be being allowed to slip away because we think that we are doing all of this for the greater good. When I think about everyone day to day and how much they are suffering, we're not even talking about the economic effects and how small and medium business make up, like, I think it's 65% of the economy. And most of them either are not functioning at the moment, or they are at such a low capacity, they'd be lucky to even be paying their rent or paying their mortgages. Okay, I have to take a toilet break. I'll cut this back in a moment. All right, I talked so much that I had to take a break, go to the bathroom, get some water, and resituate myself. I'm not going to rave on for too much longer because we are at a half an hour point, but thank you for those who are still listening. I love that you are here with me, and I hope that you can comment and tell me what you think. Especially, I know that there are a few people that have come to me that don't necessarily agree with what I have to say, and they're the ones that I want to hear from the most. I want to hear if you've learned anything, if there's anything you sorely disagree with, if there's anything new, because this is the thing that's the saddest part of society, is the divide and conquer. And that, as I said, like, I've lost friends because their opinion is so polar to me, and it gets heated, whether it's them or me at the time, and then we can't even express ourselves and talk. It's just like, oh, you're this way, you're that way, we can't be friends. And that is what no conspiracy, just that is what they want us to do. They want to play us against each other so that we are divided, and then when we vote one way or the other. It's pretty much that simple. This doesn't have to be a grand scheme conspiracy to know that it is all just about re-election. It is all just about their power to move forward and what they're going to be able to do. And it's pretty much just, it's an all political hot potato. So just quickly, one thing that is probably the driving force behind what's changing the conversation at the moment, and something I didn't go into much detail about, is so many people have lost their jobs, are going to lose their businesses, which also means that they are going to lose their homes and other things. Now, I do notice, and correct me if I'm wrong, you speak up in the comments or somewhere on social media to me, if you are still pro-lockdown and the main parts of your life have not been affected, so your income hasn't been affected, generally speaking, because I see that most people who are pro-lockdown have been able to work from home, or they work for a government agency who haven't been affected, or they've somehow been able to float it. So I want to hear from you. If you're pro-lockdown and you run a business and you haven't been able to have this business trading, because this is the thing, as I said, 65% of the Australian economy is made up from small and medium-term business. At the moment, in Victoria, there are businesses that have not been able to function barely at all since the first lockdown. And if they are functioning, they are at low capacity. Right now, with the extremes of this snap lockdown that seems to be extended, they are not trading, okay? So when people are not trading, that doesn't mean that their debt doesn't still accumulate. They're still paying, they're still paying rent. They're still paying, if they own the place, a mortgage. They're still paying taxes. They're still paying land taxes, rates, all these things. The government, which is state, Victoria, has not put a hold on these things. We can also then talk about things like registration. Melbourne people couldn't drive for what was like nearly 6 months of last year, but they still have to pay a full registration. And even for non-business owners, if you own a home in Victoria, you still have to go and pay rates. And what happened to the mortgage pauses? Like, that's a federal thing, but or even state, if they want to make it that way. People are, didn't have, there was like, when at the start of this COVID stuff, people actually had mortgage pauses. But I feel like where we're at now in Victoria is it's worse, far worse than it was when they actually had those mortgage pauses mandated across everything. And when they brought JobKeeper and JobSeeker in, those things like JobKeeper is mostly gone. There's still parts of aviation who are getting it. But yeah, JobSeeker's there, but it's $620 a fortnight. Who can afford to live on $620 a fortnight? Yes, some people may who have been on it for a long time, but people generally have come from really high functioning jobs with higher incomes, and yes, poor them because they've had good jobs, but it means that their expenses are higher and there's no accommodating for that. Like, these people still have mortgages that are not on hold, that are still, even when they were on hold, accumulating interest, so they're still costing them a fortune. Who's going to pay for them? It's like, who's paying for these businesses' loans? Who's paying for all these things that are still accruing? They haven't put a national debt freeze on interest rates, which federal or states could do it. They're choosing not to. All I'm saying is there are so many pillars that the government could be helping right now, and they are not. And I'm not going to go right into this in this episode. I'll say a little bit on it. If you don't want to hear it, that's fine. But this government, state and federal, is completely incompetent in helping the people. You can't lock down people and then not give them some sort of subsidy to help them. They're talking about these small business applications and that you can ring up and make them straight away. It's not true. There's a 10-hour wait to get through to them. Dan has lied about this today in presses. Like, go and follow Voice of Victoria for more information. It's not up to me to show you this. and get some real facts on what's going on. And even if you are eligible, which most people who don't earn more than $75,000 are, it's a drop in the fucking ocean. It is a drop in the ocean. So apart from all of that, just quickly to tie this back in with lockdowns, tell me if you are pro-lockdown and you have and you have had your income changed. Because this is the other thing about mental health. If you don't know where your next paycheck is coming from and how you are going to feed yourself or your family or pay for your necessities, like not for luxuries, I'm talking about pay your rent, pay your mortgage, pay for your fuel, pay for your pharmaceuticals, if you have medicines, pay for your animals, all these things. If you don't know where that's coming from, how scary is that? And that is the position that people have been put in, not by choice. People aren't choosing and going, I'm quitting my job and doing whatever. They have no choice. They cannot go to their jobs. They cannot even earn an income if they tried. And I had someone say the other day, oh, but there's so many jobs out there. Maybe in the government sector there are, but that doesn't mean that every person is going to be able to get a job and be fit for them. There isn't enough support for the people, and that is my problem. I guess in conclusion, I'm just going to say lockdowns may to you be like a good idea because you are worried about people getting sick, and I understand no one wants anyone to suffer, okay? No one wants anyone to die from COVID, but please understand that what is happening right now has such a bigger toll long-term overall to the alternative of opening up the country. The country was open through most of summer and things, people were still social distancing. And I do believe that the problem is that we're going from one extreme to the next. I'm not saying I have all the answers. I'm saying that they haven't even changed the conversation to start talking about option. They just go, lockdown, it's the only thing. When if you even speak to the elderly over 85, who are the ones who are most at risk, they only have a few years left, if at all, on this earth. Do you think they want to be spent locked up and everyone else locked up at their expense? The ones that I've talked to, no. And they are being withheld from their grandchildren, from their children, from doing the last things in their life that they can. What I'm saying is there is so much more you need to consider, because I hate to tell you that, again, without getting too political on this, but in America, people are living their lives not even knowing about COVID anymore. And in other parts of Europe, like one of the show jumping tours I follow, which is a really rich show jumping tour, they've still been able to tour around the whole of Europe for the last 12, well, not 12 months, but at least 8 months. Other countries are getting on with it, and it's not just because of vaccination rate, right? There are alternatives. We need to seek out what other countries are doing. We need to at least sit down and find out what is working and what is not, and that's not what's happening at the moment. We are just being told lockdown is the only answer when we need to look at all the factors and see if there is another way. No one wants anyone to suffer. No one wants anyone to die. But right now, people are suffering. People are dying, and it is not because of COVID. All right. That'll do for episode 2 of Estelle Says, because we've been here for a while now. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you've taken something from this, and that my levels in the mic have been okay. It's a bit hard to kind of look at a camera and talk into a mic at the same time. And I hope everyone just quickly are able to do the things that they are in control of. That is, try and get a good amount of sleep. Try and eat as best that they can. Move your body for more than 45 minutes a day to induce sweat. This is all from a psychologist. This is not me being a doctor. And try and connect with people in ways that you can, because connection and need for community and tribe is paramount. I'm all about going and hugging your neighbor. You're going to be, let's find your own thing. Call up someone. FaceTime. I know a lot of people are completely withdrawn at the moment because it's just too much, but you are a human. You need to try and find things that you can control that are going to help you to feel good. And exercise, eating well, sleeping and talking to people, listening to music, being creative, all that stuff is awesome. And if you are struggling, please reach out. I'm not going to have all the answers for you, but I hate being like, just give Kids Helpline a ring if you're a child, or just give Lifeline a call. But also give your friends a call. And if you don't have friends, give those numbers a call. But reach out to people, because often people don't realize the worst thing is, I'd love to say, the next thing is, if you know someone is suffering, reach into them, okay? Because even if you just a quick phone call or a text, see how they are. Generally, when you are at the lowest of the low, it's going to be harder for you to reach out. And that's what really happens with suicide. Is they say that it's pretty much a spare of the moment thing, and it's people not being able to cope with something that's happened in their circumstances. And financial stress is actually, through the WHO, if you look it up, the highest cause of suicide. So it's no mistake, everything that I've just talked about, how they all tie in together. So there are a lot of people financially suffering. If you have a friend that you know is going through a lot of financial stress, you don't have to be able to give them money. You can just give them a phone call, listen to them. Even if they don't want to talk, just let them know that you're there, because connection, love, and community is going to help us. And to get out of this, we need to try and stay connected and not divided. Well, that's enough for me tonight. I hope that you all are tucked in warm, Victorians. Anyone outside of Victoria, just quickly, what's happening in Sydney and the regioning on who's locked up where, who can't go to work, is not cool at all. I'm not going to go into it in this episode, but I am anti-lockdown. If you have reasons why you are pro or anti, please leave it in the comments. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. I hated people that said that, but now I understand it. Thank you so much.